The year is 1914. Cadillac was to offer an all-new engine cylinder configuration design, the V8. But make no mistake, the V8 engine wasn't invented by Cadillac. Cadillac wasn't even responsible for producing the first V8 in America. That goes to Buffin in 1905. The first V8 in the world was called the Antoinette, produced in 1903 in France. As the story goes, Charles Kettering, who was head engineer of Dayton Engineering Laboratories Company, aka Delco, purchased a de Leon V8 for research. Kettering, along with help from Edward Deeds, would take the engine apart, reassemble it, take it apart, put it back together until the pair was able to build their own design, which they submitted to Henry Leland himself. Using Kettering's and Deeds' engine as a starting point, Leland would hire D. McCall White to be in charge of building an all-new V8 engine. This engine was built in complete secrecy in a small building just a few miles outside of Detroit. It's essentially two four-cylinder blocks arranged in a V formation, hence the name. Cadillac decided to go with a 90-degree cylinder bank angle. The blocks of cylinders are bolted to a copper alloy aluminum crankcase, which is split horizontally into two sections, an upper section and a lower section. The lower section holds oil. The upper section carries the crankshaft, which has three main bearings. Directly above the crankshaft is a single camshaft, which operates the intake and exhaust valves. Two valves per cylinder, one intake, one exhaust. The valves are found inside the engine block, running right on top of piston location. The blocks of cylinders were right across from one another without offset, using fork and blade connecting rods. Just above the camshaft is another shaft, a vertical shaft called the generator shaft, which drives the fan. Both the camshaft and generator shaft are driven by silent chain. The V8 engine operates as a single engine, whereas the later multi-cylinder V configurations such as V12, V16s, they operate as two engines sharing the same crankshaft. The Cadillac V8 engine was built by Northway. Northway Engine Company was founded by Ralph Norway around 1903, originally called Eureka Manufacturing Company. Ralph got financial assistance from Henry Ford, and the company was to originally build/manufacture parts for Ford cars. The company expanded rapidly. They would soon offer a line of axles, engines, and transmissions. In 1904, Eureka Manufacturing Company would change their name to Northway Motor and Manufacturing Company. Northway Company was purchased by William Durant in 1909 for General Motors. But worth pointing out that Northway would still do engine contracts for various companies. Introduced in September of 1914 for the 1915 model year, 314 cubic inch displacement, L-head V8, 5.1 liters. It's good for 70 horsepower at 2,400 RPM, 180 pound-feet, or 244 newton meters around 2,000 RPM, with a bore of 3.1 inches and a stroke of 5.1 inches, three main bearings. Years this engine was used was between 1914 through 1926. The very first year that this engine was offered, it did not have detachable heads. Fun fact, another company called Cole, who also used Northway to build their engines, came out with an engine, a V8 engine, with detachable cylinder heads 1 year after Cadillac. And then Cadillac had detachable heads, so go figure. In 1923, Cadillac did some improvements to their 314 V8, giving it a new cross-plane crankshaft, which bumped horsepower up to 83.5 horsepower. So we're going to stop there with Cadillac, and we're going to come back to Cadillac, but not a lot of people know Oldsmobile and Oakland also got versions of their own V8. The Oldsmobile version would first show up in 1916, and it was used in models 44, 45, 45A, 45B, 46, and 47. Oldsmobile's version was 246 cubic inch displacement, L-head, V8, 4 liters. It was good for anywhere between 40 to 58 horsepower at 2,400 RPM. This is just an estimate of 140 pound-feet or 189 newton meters around 1800 RPM with a bore of 2.875 inches and a stroke of 4.75 inches. It rides on three main bearings. Years this engine was used was between 1916 to about 1923-ish. In 1920, Norway would build an all-new engine for the Oldsmobile, giving it an aluminum block. It was called the Light 8, 233 cubic inch displacement, L-head V8. 3.8 liters. It was good for anywhere between 54 to 63 horsepower, 2400 RPM. Just an estimate of 144 pound-feet or 195 newton meters around 1800 RPM with a bore of 2.875 inches and a stroke of 4.5 inches. Years this engine was used was between 1921 through 1923. Oldsmobile would kill off their V8 after 1923 for a number of different reasons. The main reason was the 6 came out about the same time and it was outselling the V8. Oldsmobile would go to a straight 8 in 1932 and would use it until 1940. You can find out more about it in this video. There wouldn't be another V8 for Oldsmobile until 1949. But it's worth mentioning, Oldsmobile got a companionship make called Viking that slotted above Oldsmobile, and it was the only companionship make to be worth more than the existing brand that shared a V8 with Oakland with a very interesting valve layout. Speaking of Oakland, they would get their very own version, but had a much shorter run. And it was only available from 1916 through 1917. The car was the Model 50, not to get confused with the later Model 50 with the horizontal valve engine that was shared with Viking. Talk about a ghost. Information is spotty at best. Apparently, there was a fire at the plant and all the records were lost. If anybody has more information to add to the Oakland V8 Model 50, 1916 through 1917, would greatly appreciate it. 346.4 cubic inch displacement L-head V8, 4 liters. It's good for anywhere between 40 to 54 horsepower at 2400 RPM with an estimated 140 pound-feet, 189 newton meters around 1800 RPM with a bore of 3.5 inches and a stroke of 4.5 inches. 3 main bearings. It's worth mentioning Oakland's V8 was only available in one body style. Years this engine was used was 1915 through 1917. Sources conflict. Some say it went from 15 to 17. Other sources say 16 to 17. Oakland would drop the V8 after 1917 because of poor sales. The buying public was content with 4s and 6s. Oakland would get a horizontal valve engine in 1929, which they shared with Viking. And Oakland would switch places with Pontiac. Pontiac would use the horizontal V8 engine for its very first year before switching to a straight 8. All right, back to Cadillac. The year is 1928 when this engine was introduced. 341 cubic inch displacement L-head V8, 5.6 liters. It's good for 90 horsepower, 3,000 RPM, 208 pound-feet, or 282 newton meters around 1,800 RPM with a bore of 3.9 inches and a stroke of 4.9 inches. Compression is 5.3 to 1 with 3 main bearings. Years this engine was used was between 1928 through 1929. It could be found in the Series 341 and the 341B. In 1930, Cadillac would increase displacement to 353 cubic inch displacement. L-head V8, 5.8 liters. It was good for anywhere between 96 to 130 horsepower at 3,000 RPM with an estimated 230 pound-feet or 311 newton meters around 1,800 RPM with a bore of 3.4 inches and a stroke of 4.9 inches. Compression was 5.03 to 1 or 625 to 1. Years this engine was used was 1930 through 1936. In 1936, Cadillac would make an all-new block design, the monobloc, where the cylinder blocks and the crankcase were all one unit. But, as they say, that is another engine episode for another day. All right, now it's time for Would You Rather. These aren't in the same class category, but which one would you rather have? 1915 Cadillac Type 51, or 1916 Oakland Model 50, or 1923 Oldsmobile Model 47. I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. On to the second scenario. All Cadillac 1925 Cadillac V63, or 1930 Cadillac Series 353, or 1935 Cadillac 355-D. Once again, I'm going to leave this here for a minute. If you need more time, feel free, pause the video. All right, now it's time for Name That Tune. First person to get both the name of the band, song title, and the lyric that comes right before will have their comment pinned to the top of the comment section. But since I met you, baby, love's got a hold on me. Thank you all so much for coming out and watching this. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you can always shoot me a comment in the comment section below. I read and answer all comments posted. I don't say that for self-worth. I just say that if you post a comment on here, I will definitely read it and get back to you. If you'd like to reach me outside of YouTube, you can always send me an email at what_it's_like at a lost and mostly forgotten obscure web provider that still exists, yahoo.com, if interested. Thank you guys so much for everything that you bring. I appreciate everything that you guys do, all the information that you guys provide, because the internet doesn't know everything. And it just really means a lot that you guys do that. Until next time, toodaloo! I never knew you were a pickup man.